Okay, I guess we can go ahead and get started. So everybody should have a copy of the PowerPoint, which is just a 2-page thing. And then hopefully there's enough to share of the big packets, because I didn't want to kill too many trees, which has all of the handouts for the zones program that I wanted to at least let you guys take a look at so you could see. And then, of course, if you actually want to use this or need copies, we can then make more copies. And I don't have them on the computer, so as we go through the PowerPoint for those that'll be watching this later, I'll leave a copy of everything at the desk with the information in the collaboration or in the presentation folder, so they'll be able to get access to it there. Okay, so this is the zones of regulation, and this is a program that was developed by an occupational therapist, Leah Kuypers, if I'm saying her last name right. And basically, it's a systematic cognitive behavioral treatment approach used to help kids learn to better regulate their emotions and make better behavior choices given the many different situational challenges that they face. So they break it down into 4 concrete color zones to help simplify it for kids, and then based on occupational therapy background, pull in a lot of sensory tools as well as more traditional cognitive behavioral therapy thinking strategies to help them manage those emotions, and use different types of tools to help calm and regulate. And because it pulls in such a variety of tools, it's helpful for a very large age range, from the very young who are going to use fewer of the thinking strategies to the older kids who will use more of those. So by trying to use tools that address the deficits that they have in emotional and sensory regulation, the thinking tools addressing more of the executive functioning deficits and social cognition deficits, the curriculum is designed to help them move toward more independent regulation, which is particularly needed in the school setting. And this is a program that's been widely accepted in the school settings. I haven't run across too many schools personally that don't already have this system in place. So when you're working with kids, a lot of them are already familiar with this in the school. What varies to me seems to be how much they're integrating it into their daily classroom routine. So it's based on some of the tools they use in the socialthinking.com website, which looks at superflex thinking versus rock brain thinking, and there's a whole big curriculum designed around that as well, and it pulls in some of those tools in this program. Basically trying to teach students to identify their feelings as well as their level of arousal or alertness, how much energy they have in their body and how much control they have over that energy, how able they are to pay attention, focus, listen, make good choices, all of that. Trying to find the right wording for kids to understand that second part is pretty key. And so arousal, which is the term they use often, that, or alertness, is basically a state of the nervous system that describes your perception of your environment. How, if you're unconscious, you're at, of course, no arousal, you're unconscious. But then there's all sorts of levels beyond that, where low levels where you're minimally processing things around you, up to being over-aroused, where you're anxious, agitated, and all of that. So we want them at the optimal level of arousal, which, again, they can use tools to try to achieve that. And then self-regulation is the ability to modulate that, to shift your zone or shift your level of arousal to where you need it to be. So the zones, to describe them in words, it looks at the red zone, yellow zone, green zone, and blue zone. The red zone being the top level of that arousal state where you're highly aroused and you're not going to be in control. It's kind of an out of control state. And the main feelings are going to be anger, rage, or explosive behavior. They used to also include, on the original zones sheet, which I think is in the packet, They used to include elation in there, super excitement, but in all the things I've been looking at recently, they're targeting more the negative side of this range of arousal versus that super excited. And I think they're kind of putting super excited more in the yellow zone, even though that can be kind of out of control too. The yellow zone then is a starting to lose control phase where the emotions will range across all areas of being silly, excited, to being frustrated and worried. And the green zone is that optimal level of arousal where they are able to focus, sit still, concentrate, have enough energy to do their work, and be kind of also in the middle in terms of their feelings, just being calm, happy state. The blue zone is on the low end of arousal where they're feeling tired. They may be sick, bored, tired, or sad. And that's the fun little chart that I think Emily posted on the L Drive. So this is, again, as you see it, a little updated version from that original one. And I think I did include this in the big packets, but you can get the color copy of this on the L Drive, where they're kind of leaving off elation in the red zone and talking more about the other side of that and kind of, I think, kind of grouping it more into the yellow zone. I like this version over the original version of the zones because it pulls in things from movies that kids have seen, so it helps them to kind of pull together what we're really talking about when we're grouping it into these colors. The problem with, of course, the Inside Out movie, for those of you that watched it, is that Joy is yellow, she's not green, so you kind of have to overcome that she's not the right color, but that is, by putting it in this picture, at least it shows where she does belong in this grouping of colors. The other big thing that they're really stressing since this program really came out is that all the zones are okay. We're not trying to teach the kids, you always have to be in the green zone. Everybody shifts through all of these zones and levels of arousal throughout each day. So they're really trying to use this not as a discipline program, but rather as a way to teach kids to just pay attention to what's going on inside their body, how they're feeling. And when they are in a not feeling good, or they're in a state or level of arousal that isn't working for them, like they're really worked up and running around and out of control, but they just walked into the library, it teaches them what they can do to kind of shift that down to be able to function and succeed in the environment that they're in. And there's an article that's posted on the Zones of Regulation website that goes into that. And sometimes I've been giving that lately to parents. It's written for parents to make sure that they're not using this as a punishment or getting negative about it, because it's not about being mad that somebody's in the red zone. It's about understanding why and helping them to manage that. So evidence on this program. In talking about whether we're trying to use more evidence-based practices, this program has actually been developed based on evidence, but there's not been a lot of studies yet done on this as a program with, I think there's 18 lessons in the book. I didn't bring the book in here, but there's a lot of lessons. So to call this evidence-based practice, there should be studies based on using these 18 lessons and see how it does compared to other types of programs in helping kids develop better self-regulation. And there are studies in progress. If you go to the Zones of Regulation website, you can access this page that I basically copied this from and click the tab, or down here it tells you what current research is being conducted on this as a program. Why they call it a practice based on evidence is that all the strategies in here have evidence to support their use either in the occupational therapy field or in our mental health field with cognitive behavioral strategies that are being used. So hopefully they will get their evidence so that we can call it an evidence-based practice. Most people probably don't use this other than the school programs with those 18 steps. Personally, I've in the packet that I put together, there's a list of 10 sessions that I've broken it down into, but this is still only one piece of the treatment approach for the kids that I'm working with. I still have to work with parents on discipline. There's still a lot of other pieces. So this wouldn't be the only thing you would probably do with kids to help them. This is just one piece, that self-regulation part, that you would be using, possibly using these strategies to help the families. So for me, I broke down her system into 3 parts. Part 1 is just teaching them the zones, not only the child, but the whole family, so they all understand this concept of, identifying your feelings and then looking at that level of arousal and deciding what zone they're in. And then getting really good at that. So there's a zones bingo game. And I put in here, these letters refer to the handouts that are part of this Zones of Regulation program. And that's what's in those big packets. It comes with a little letter to parents to explain the zones. It comes with a glossary, a list of terms that are in the zones program for parents to look over. And when I did this as a group, I would give this to the parents at the start of the group to look at. I think lots of modifications can be made with that. It could be really beneficial to have the parents have a session of their own, or be in that first session. I think there's a lot of different ways you can handle that. When I do it one-on-one with kids, I keep the parents in the room for the first session, because it's really important that they understand these zones, because your little 5-year-old's going to have a tough time teaching the parents on their own. This is the original one, the zones program with the faces. It is in color in the sheets that you can print off of the CD that they give you. So because we don't have enough money to have color copies for all the kids, I use this as an activity to color in the spaces blue, green, red, and yellow, so they can kind of visually see what these different zones are as we're talking about it in the early sessions. There's at the start of the session, whether I'm working with a child individually or when I did groups, I give them a green folder to keep all this information in. And so we decorate the folder. And that's one of the handouts. There's a bingo game that they can play. The blue, there's feeling faces, which you can go through and talk about expressions and how to identify feelings based on what's going on with somebody's face. And then later on, you'll talk more about their body. So these are some of the handouts that are listed on these the letters that I put up here. Basically trying to help them name feelings, categorize them into the zone, understand how, just looking at their bodies, someone can tell what zone they're in, whether they're sitting still, they're running around. And then secondly, understanding that how they're acting impacts other people. It affects how they feel, and it affects what's going to happen next. So there's lessons and activities to help them start talking about that. And they use the terms expected and unexpected, which most kids do seem, I think, to understand those terms. But sometimes I've gone with what zone should you be in? What zone would you is more likely? Trying to find the right words that help them understand what you're talking about. So like when you're in school, how do you think your teacher expects you to act, or how should you act? So they can kind of start seeing how they're feeling and acting in terms of what's expected. And when they're in unexpected zones, how does that make others feel? So a lot of time is spent on that, because that's actually kind of a tough concept for some of the younger ones in particular to think about how this is impacting other people. And they kind of go with just helping the kids to understand that when you're in an expected zone, basically everybody feels good. When you're in an unexpected zone, it kind of makes people feel uncomfortable. So as you're going through all these sheets, you can kind of summarize it that way, that when they're concerned, they're worried, they're sad, they're feeling kind of uncomfortable. And then there's also a part where you'll talk about the triggers. So you'll look, in talking about expected and unexpected zones, you look at all the situations and what zone you might expect for those situations. And then when they might be in an unexpected zone, that would usually indicate that something happened, what triggered them to be in a zone that wasn't expected. Part 2 then focuses on the tools, where we explore all the different sensory tools. Basically anything that kids do to help regulate themselves becomes now a tool, something that they use. So I have a whole list of things that I pulled from the book, from getting a drink of water, chewing gum, and then there's the picture ones that they have in the book as well. But anything that the kids mention that they've already been doing, I play with my Legos, that becomes their tool to help them regulate. So they broke it down into sensory tools. The calming strategies are taking a deep breath, counting to 10. And the thinking strategies are more the problem-solving ones, using the superflex thinking, size of the problem. And again, those are the handouts that correlate to those, teaching those tools. The ones that are, so like for size of the problem in particular, I've struggled with that with a lot of the kids, and I finally found something on the internet that, I work with the younger ones though, so when you have older kids, maybe this isn't as necessary, but the little kids think everything is a 5. Everything is horrible, terrible problem. So I've always worked with them on, well, a 5 would mean it's a fire, an emergency, you've got to go to the hospital. But this one actually had pictures of faces, which of course kids have an easier time with faces. So this is not part of the original Zones program, but somebody came up with a way of looking at the size of the problem with the emergency red face, and then just this normal sad face, and then specifics again. So helping kids again understand just how big these problems really are, and then what their emotional response again should be. So again, using tools to get them there when it's not and where it should be. So this is a list of some examples of I guess basically the calming techniques and the thinking strategies, with the sensory supports being more activity-based things like taking a break, jumping jacks, swinging, going for a walk, talking to an adult. And then part 3 is then now using your tools. So practice, practice, practice. They work on helping kids see what the tools, whether they help them calm, whether they help them be a little bit more alert, building a toolbox, and then using rewards to help kids to practice using their tools at home. There's tracking sheets that we encourage them to write down when they've used a tool, and then whether it helped or not, just to go ahead and give them points or some sort of token system to motivate them to want to do this. It's again a change in their normal way of handling things, so we have to kind of put something in there to motivate them to make that change in their behavior. When they learn to use and apply their tools, we have handouts on how to recognize when it's time to use a tool. So again, the yellow zone is the optimal time to use the tool before you get to red zone. Some kids the tools they might use in red zone might be taking a break, taking deep breaths to calm down so that they can then use some other tools to solve the problem. And then teaching them problem solving techniques like the stop, opt, and go, superflex thinking, so that they can actually, after they're calm, figure out a way to independently solve their problem. And again, at the end of using your tools, helping them to be motivated to practicing this enough that they've earned enough tool awards to get their license. And then with the young ones again, I say, and now you're a Zones master. And I think I'm trying to relate that to like the ninja stuff, because I think that's pretty cool. But and now they also, when I started with this program, I don't know, 3 years ago, there was an app that came along pretty quickly. But I didn't use it much because, again, working with 6 and under, there's a lot of reading on the Zones apps if you're familiar with that. Now, though, with this new one, they have an audio voiceover, so the kids can click a button and it reads it for them. So I think this new one's going to be much more usable, and I think it covers the same things. I don't know if I can play this. Does that work? Since I took the time to stick these links in there, see if it'll play. Oh, he was just about to go. Set up all the way.
The red zone.
Oh,
another for
thank you.
controllable emotions like frustration, the yellow zone. Another for calm emotions like happiness, that's the green zone. And the final zone for lonely feelings like sadness, obviously called the blue zone. A small indie studio in California teamed up with an experienced occupational therapist to create the Zones of Regulation app. The app helps kids identify when they're in a zone, how they got there, and how to manage their emotions to move between zones. It's educational, but also fun for kids. They won't get bored. To play the game, you choose a character and name them, let's say your child's name. Then you play through tutorials and exercises for each zone and a few games for entertainment. But the general premise of the Zones of Regulation app is to help fast forward a kid's emotional intelligence. And from what I can see, it definitely will help. It's good stuff. Now, the game is available for nearly any device out there and costs $4.99 and $9.99, depending upon the version. To learn more, you can head to celosoft.com.
So I thought that gave a good, can I click on this one, or which one did I click on to go back?
The zones of regulation. If you close it out, there are 4 zones of regulation.
Close all the way up here?
Blue, green, yellow, and red.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to get rid of the whole thing. All right, the second one shows you how they do the voiceover, or the audio version.
The Zones of Regulation. Exploring Emotions is a new educational application for mobile and desktop platforms and is a follow-up to the original Zones of Regulation app. Exploring Emotions is designed to provide a more in-depth experience of the curriculum, offering many new features and creative ways to practice the zones. The goal of the app is to have students utilize zones teachings in their everyday lives. To assist, we embedded the app with contextual environments and situations they are familiar with, helping to bridge the divide between learning through media and applying in daily living. Settings within the app include places students spend much of their day, including the classroom, cafeteria, and playground. A very exciting feature of the app is the ability to graph your zones over the course of the day. Not only does this feature allow students to self-monitor the fluctuation and management of their zones, it also supplies teachers, therapists, or caregivers with a vital date that they can opt to save and share, allowing them to evaluate the student's progress over time and determine challenges that need additional support. Given the diversity in ages and abilities in students that the app appeals to, we felt it was vital to include audio voiceover, therefore eliminating the need to be a reader in order to use most of the app. Tools to support regulation are naturally introduced throughout scenes and events in the app. The new toolbox adds more versatility, allowing students the ability to type in additional tools or delete tools they no longer feel are useful. There are a couple of mini-games infused in the app. In addition to adding fun, rewarding experiences for the students to keep them motivated and engaged, the outcomes of the mini-games allow students the opportunity to reflect on and apply the self-regulation skills being taught. Students can also customize many features on their avatar, including the ability to purchase new hairstyles, hair color, and different outfits. The new app has been designed from the ground up to be very intuitive. Navigating your way through the app is explained by the narrator and has been designed for ease of use. You can also return to any point in the app by accessing the navigation menu. Any portion of the app you have unlocked can be replayed to reinforce the lessons taught. The Zones of Regulation, Exploring Emotions is available now. Download today and build self-regulation skills in new and exciting ways.
As you can see too, there's tons of YouTube videos now on the zones. And I've heard a lot of kids saying that are using this in schools and with me, they go on these YouTube videos and they talk, they see other kids talking about using the tools. And so, I mean, their parents are doing this with them, I hope to, because I'm sure there's a lot of junk out there too on the YouTube website with the different videos that are being out there. But I'm hearing a lot of good things about the videos that people are posting. So I tried to look at a few of them to see what exactly they were talking about. It's mostly kids that have made videos showing how they're using their tools, and I think that's what people are finding the most useful. But there's also a lot of people that have posted just information about the Zones program in their own little YouTube video. That's my final little link there to end with. But I showed you how big is my problem. The other thing that I had to go and find, because the Superflex strategy was pretty limited in the Zones book. So as I said, there's a whole vast array of information out there on social thinking and using Superflex. So I included a few things, again, just off the internet with the pictures of Superflex and Rock Brain. And the other thing that in researching this over the last changes from the original program over the last 2 years, is that they're finding that in populations like ADHD and the autism spectrum disorder kids, that they have a hard time with this red zone. They feel very negative about that, and they don't like to be in the red zone. So they're making a little bit of a shift to not talking so much always about being in the red zone, but having red zone behaviors. Trying to focus on the behavior part of it, because they tend to have a little easier time accepting that their behavior is red zone. So, and then that can be unacceptable. So that's there's changing a little bit of the toolbox even. People are shifting that to look a little bit differently, to focus more on the behavioral side of that, to help with that resistance of working on red zone. So that's the one that I kind of like, little shift in the toolbox. So it shows you how you feel, but then it's what you can do. And you'll put your tools in there when you feel angry and mad. And then I guess another one, there's another one that talks about more about the behaviors that you can shift. Instead of hitting, I can do this. So more expected behaviors. And so, they reflect that language in the expected and unexpected, not just expected zone, but expected behavior. Like you may be feeling mad because you just got hit, but what's the expected behavior in this situation? So that seems to be helping too, with focusing a little bit more on the behavioral end of things and using the zones. Now I know I haven't taught the zones group in quite a while, and several of you have. So if any of you have any other insights to share with the group before I click my final video, I'm sure everybody would be happy to hear.
I think when I bring in the group, the biggest thing that I noticed was the parents' involvement and how engaged they were. So I had groups that I saw huge changes with the kids because the parents were using all the things outside of session. And then I've had groups where they come to group and that was kind of just the extent of it. So I think when I promote the idea of the zones, I also let the family know that this is really like a language that they're going to end up using in their household. And it's just, I think it really depends on how engaged the parent is too. I had a kiddo who was like 6, and mom came in and said by the end of group their 3-year-old was starting to use the same language. So the other cool thing I think with this is that it's very adaptable, and I know that there's kind of a lot of concerns that have been brought up in previous sessions of like, what do I do with these really little these little kids. I just had a really bright 3-year-old in my office, and I actually recommended mom try the zones because other more simplistic strategies just haven't worked, and mom's like on top of discipline, that's all working. So they were really looking at just not a disciplinary system, but more of like a just like a behavior modification approach. And so mom was like all on board. Like this was just so exciting for mom to hear about. So I think the idea of like when you do get littles in your office, even if you're seeing them individually, like you can certainly adapt this to even younger ages. That's harder to do in a group setting. And I know the group isn't up and running yet, but I do have several materials, you know, as does Susan. So I mean, if you guys need my binder or want to dig through stuff, just let me know because it's a really cool thing for families to have. And then a lot of schools are starting to use it. So that language is also becoming really common. I had a lot of kids come in and they're like, oh yeah, I did this at school, you know, last year, blah, blah, blah. And so like now it's becoming a very universal language, which is cool because we always promote consistency between environments. So obviously that's really helpful when a school does it too. So.
Yeah, I think that's, when you're working one-on-one, it's easier to keep a gauge on how much the parents are using it, how involved they are. You can pull them in for more part of your sessions. And like I said, I always have them sit in on for the whole first session, for sure. And depending on the age of the child, they may sit in on every session. But in the groups, I do think that's a struggle. You have to, the more you can get the parents engaged, especially if you feel like they're not engaged, and working that into your schedule, the better the outcome will be, for sure. I do have, at the very end of the big packets, a list of the detailed outline of how I use the zones. And this is not only from when I did it as a group, but even individually. So when I'm like working on these different sections, like part 1, part 2, and part 3, I have it broken down into 10 sessions altogether. On the back of your 2-page, there's a brief version of it. So everybody's got at least a brief version of the goals for 10 sessions. But I do have a detailed one. I think there is on the L drive another, I think that's 10 sessions also that somebody posted on there from doing the group, the zones, to kind of help guide like what you're trying to accomplish in each week that you're seeing them, and the different kind of homework assignments that you might consider giving. And basically all of those handouts that are in those big packets, I have grouped into by the week so that it's just easy when I meeting with someone. I know we've been working on, you know, session 3, and now I'm ready for session 4, I pull it out. I don't always get through the whole session in a real session, so sometimes we have to put things off because sometimes they need more time working on certain tools, or even doing the charting zones across the day in order to see, you know, their unexpected behaviors and what's triggering that. So you just kind of go as they need to, so that by the end, when they're expected to be earning these tool awards, they actually can to get their zones license. Yes.
I'm not, you know, like trained on the zones of regulation, but I do see a lot of little kiddos, and I use basically this stuff a lot. It's just that I didn't have like the specifics on it. But my question is, in the zones of regulation, when you teach it, do you teach how to disengage from like arguments or conflicts before they can start using coping skills? Because there's a lot of little kiddos, and actually just kids in general, who go through the training and then they're like, you know, my child like knows it. They got it cognitively, but when they're in the moment, in the moment they like are taking off just when they're in the yellow zone, and they just can't get it through like, what do I do? Because they're just, you know, overwhelmed. And so I almost think like the first step is like teaching them how to disengage and how to the stop, stop, and go, I know is sort of that, so that they then can give themselves a second to breathe and then start to use the zones or recognize or use the coping skills or use the strategies. So I don't know how much of that is taught in this.
Well, if I'm let me know if I'm understanding. So when the kids are taught to use the tools, they're taught to, the parents can't force them to use the tools. So I think that that's an disengagement right there, because instead of them engaging in this escalated emotional state that they're in, they are, either in reminding them of what zone you're in, do you need a tool right now, and they're staying calm. And then again, they do, if they're in the red zone state, taking a break is probably the first thing, or taking a deep breath, so they will disengage. So I think that is being taught by teaching them the tools versus maybe what they had been doing prior to that. And again, different from a discipline system where they might, like with 1, 2, 3 magic, you might count that. But with this system, you would try to move the kids toward handling this more independently. Like, I see you're getting dysregulated, like in the red zone, do you need a tool? Because if this continues, then maybe discipline would follow. But right now, you're hoping to stay disengaged so they can handle it. Is that what you're saying?
I guess what I wonder is, I do this a lot in my sessions. Like, I do a lot of this, and what I do a lot of is trying to work on collaborative parenting. And so teaching parents how to approach kids when they're overwhelmed or angry or upset, and how to collaboratively help the kid get out of that state of mind for a second, because their mind's on fire, so that they can then engage in these things and do the cueing and prompting that we're talking about. So I guess what I mean is, like, what I tell parents is, the first thing is keep yourself in check, and then just see what's going on. So identify the emotion or whatever the zone the kid's in. And then approaching it, not trying to give the advice or jumping in right away to correct, but approaching it first by just verbalizing to the kid, I see that you're frustrated. Like, hey, you're really upset right now, you're a ball of energy. And then, like, the kid's yelling or whatever. And then telling the parent, don't engage in, like, trying to fix that argument. Like, they're saying, like, I want snack food, I want to have this food. Don't, like, respond to those literal words, but respond to the emotion that you're seeing. So teaching the parents to keep their voices calm, use a low tone of voice, get down to their level, eye contact, all that, and to comfort the kid and just say, okay, I see you're upset, you're frustrated, I can't talk to you right now when you're frustrated like this. I think you're getting frustrated, we need to break away from this, let's go over here, do this activity. And I use a analogy, and it's kind of like stop, opt, and go, but I use stop, sit, and think, kind of like stop, drop, and roll. So I teach, like, little kids, like, I don't know, I have like 3-year-olds that come in my office and they know stop, drop, and roll. Like, I don't know when it's taught in elementary school, but like every kid knows it besides one autistic kid I found. And so I'm like, okay, when you're on fire, like, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I stop, drop, and roll. And I'm like, when you're getting frustrated, you're in the yellow zone. It's kind of like your brain's on fire. And so what I wanted you to start to learn, and your parents can really help you with this. And like, I tell the parents, like, let's try to do this. When you're in that frustrated zone, stop, sit down, and think. Because it's a lot easier to stay calm when you're sitting. And so we just need to, like, break that cycle. When you get in that yellow zone, mom can be like, you're getting frustrated. Okay, what do we gotta do? We gotta stop, sit down, and then teach the parents to, like, do it with them. So kind of practice it out with them, so that they can just get them out of that state. Like, move away, like, they're getting frustrated with their brother, they're like, the brother just smashed everything, and they're like, oh, before you hit, okay, have the parent identify what's going on, and then get them disengaged from whatever they're getting frustrated, like they're getting frustrated in math homework, or, brother conflict. Disengage from that thing, go to a different physical spot for a second, and stop, sit down, and just get out of that for a second, that, like, uncontrollable mindset, so that they can then engage into this. And what I wonder sometimes is with, like, the group zones of regulation, I wonder if we could increase or encourage parent commitment or collaboration more, but maybe having at least one session where it's just practicing out in the session how the parents engage in these things or do these things with their kid. And it's really hard in a group setting, but especially in an individual setting. Because I think sometimes we cognitively talk to them. I find myself even doing this. But I wonder if sometimes if we actually practice it in the session, like we actually do a scenario, we have the parents enact, and we kind of like PCIT sort of thing, because I think we give this information and then some parents don't really have those little skills of how to approach a kid or keep your voice calm, or, they have their own issues. And so they try it out, but they fail from the get-go because they don't know how to approach it and start the process. So they say, oh, like, you're getting angry, okay, you're supposed to use that zone coping thing, and it just doesn't click. The So like I try to teach with parents, kind of just empowering them and teaching them how to approach it first. And sometimes with like the little kids, I'm like, okay, this is tough. It's tough being parents, but like let's imagine your kid fell down, they just like scraped their knee, they got like, oh, it's really bloody and stuff, and they're screaming. What's the first thing that you would do? And then parents, some parents can be that startled, like, I don't want to answer the question wrong. but they like almost to a T, every parent intuitively is like, okay, well I comfort them or I ask them if they're okay. Even like the strictest parents I have are just like, I ask them if they're all right, whatever. And I say, okay, do that every time they're overwhelmed or anxious, or they start to get into a yellow zone. Don't give the advice first. Don't step in and fix the problem first. Like the first thing is just identify what you see in the kid, the emotion that you see in them, and verbalize it to them. Like they're going off, and just keep yourself calm and be like, okay, oh my God, like my kids, like they're upset, or like they're overwhelmed, or just, even if they're just anxious or they're angry, you're doing this, you're in this state. Like we need to, like, let me help you. Let's sit down, just tell me what's going on. I know you're upset, let's sit down, let's talk about it, what's going on. And I say, just teaching the parents to like approach that so they can like help do that initial calming, and then have the parent just ask them like, tell me, and then I say, just listen. Let them like get all that, if they will sit down and just say something, let them get it all out, and don't jump in and give that advice because you shut down the conversation. And then once they're a little bit more calm, then jump into this stuff. And so I just wonder, I don't know this program that well, but I just wonder if sometimes we don't teach the first step as well as we can, because it's like we intuitively kind of do those things. Do you know what I mean? Like we approach kids that way.
Well, I think that's a great point, that the parent part is not really emphasized in the zones of regulation because it's a school-based program. So they're not really working with parents. So that is a good point, and that why I also feel like as part of our treatment package, and even whether you're doing it in groups, which again limits you even more because you would have less access to the parents other than building in those parent sessions. But you obviously will be addressing the parent component in your treatment, which is why, as an evidence, if it does get the research to support it as an evidence-based practice, I don't feel it's still a complete package. I don't feel like they probably will show that just using these 4 steps and leaving out a parent component to it, like you were talking about, is going to show that this is better than PCIT, for example, in helping kids develop good self-regulation. So that's definitely a good point to make, because that is going to be a big part, particularly with the younger children that still are in a co-regulated state and need their parents to help them to regulate. So this teaches you tools that you can work with them in, but it doesn't replace that parent component. So you still will want to address all those things.
Had a lot of success with also framing it as like the co-regulation piece, just to say like the kid probably won't be able to self-regulate completely until they're older. So for us to expect your kid to just be like, I'm 5, oh, this is where I take my deep breaths now. Like, that'd be great, but I'd be out of a job. So like, you know, let's see if we can figure out how you can be involved in that, and like this is what's realistic and normal, because I think parents expect their kids to be little adults and like they can self-regulate the way I can self-regulate. So I've had a lot of success of like breaking that down and being like, they actually shouldn't be able to, and that's normal. Like this is how we can help them. Yeah, and making sure they have appropriate expectations at the start, that they're not misled by this idea of this zones of regulation. Your child will graduate and now be a self-regulator independently, taking deep breaths whenever. Any other comments? These have all been great. Are you ready for my Cookie Monster video? Some of you may have already seen this. Oh.
He needs to help himself.
If you guys need to leave during the middle of this, that's fine. But oh, that's not right. Oh. Okay, any questions?
It stops and like,
All right, thanks very much.
You still need someone to run the zones of regulation.
Oh,
So if anyone's
yeah,
interested,
there's